So practically speaking, how do we pursue peace? And maybe you'd say it's not pursuing peace, it's pursuing humility. Like, what is that? So practically speaking, what do we pursue and how do we actually do that?
Yeah, no, that's so good. I work in a women's ministry, so I serve as director of theology and research at Proverbs 31 Ministries. Some of you are like, well, Proverbs 31, that's a whole thing about chapter in Proverbs about women, right? And you're a dude. Like, how does that work?
Gosh.
We're rolling on 9 years and it just works.
It just works.
Yeah. So to the gals that are listening, you'll probably be able to relate to this, but a lot of a common thing that you'll notice at Proverbs when you walk into the offices is checklists. Like, and the gals joke about it themselves. They're like, we're checklist gals, you know? And so like, if you're a checklist gal or you're a checklist guy, that's awesome, right? And you know what the benefit is of that checklist? Instant gratification. Like as soon as you have a task and then you check it off, it feels great to move on to the next thing. But I think we've gotten into a bad habit of viewing humility as a checklist that we move on from. Humility is not a checklist that we move on from. Humility is, in fact, the very soil of the Christian life that we are to live from. And like any soil, we have to cultivate it.
Yeah.
We've got to go back to it. And so there are a couple just very practical things that I would say about like how do we pursue it? Like this is important. I think sometimes we are longing for peace, but what we're really saying is we want the final destination, but in order to get to the destination, we've got to be committed to the process through. So the most important preposition throughout the Bible, in my opinion, is the preposition through. It was necessary for Israel to go through the Red Sea because they meet the power of Yahweh. It was necessary for the Israelites to go through the wilderness because they meet the provision of God. It was necessary for Jesus to go through Samaria. Why? He meets a Samaritan woman, half Jew, half Gentile. He becomes the first evangelist, recorded evangelist, who's a woman in the Gospels. It was necessary for Jesus to go through the cross. Why? So you and I can experience the power and the provision, the protection of Christ himself. So we live in a society that doesn't want to go through, though.
Yeah.
We want instant gratification.
Yes.
We want what we want, when we want it, how we want it, and typically the when is now, as fast as possible. We thought Prime one day or like overnight shipping was great. And then we released Prime same day shipping. Like this is next level, right? And yet the Christian life is slow growth. There's nothing immediate or instant about the Christian life that is meaningful. It is slow growth, and slow growth is so connected to soil because good soil cultivates good fruit. Compromised soil, it produces compromised fruit. And so, like, how do we cultivate these things? How do we like practically live it out? I'm going to say some things that are simple, but they're far from being simplistic.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, here's one of the things that we ought to do. You and I were not meant to live a life in isolation. Nobody was. And if you live a life in isolation, you will live a life in an echo chamber that is only concerned with I call it the unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. And in that place, pride is going to grow. And what pride does is it promises clarity, but it just delivers chaos and confusion. Right?
Yeah.
And so what we need, like Paul's favorite phrase in the New Testament is one another. It's a Greek word, allelon. It's a reciprocal pronoun. And he's constantly like, hey, sanctification, one another. Living the life of Jesus, one another. Have everything in common, one another. Like it's one another is everywhere. So what does that imply? It means in order to practically live the humble life, we need to have mirrors in front of us that are going to be honest about who we are and how we're reacting and treating life with. Like have some close friends. If you're married, your spouse should be that person. Your children, man, I've got 4 kids. My kids are means of sanctification every day.
Oh, jeez.
It's constant. It's just like it's impossible, right? Like the other day I was speaking at an event. I'm in Denver and I brought my oldest son with me and I get up and I thought I crushed it, right? And I get off and I'm sitting down and I look over at my son and I'm expecting him, Adam, to be like, Dad, that was like Michael Jordan shooting the game-winning fadeaway, right? That's what's in my heart. And he looked at me, bro, and he goes, I've heard you do better, Dad. That was okay. I'm like, what? But I'll tell you what, man. It was a humility moment for me of like, man, my son is always going to be honest with me. Like he is not too impressed with me. I'm just dad when I come off and I'm dad on that stage. I'm dad on, and that is one of the best things for me.
That's good.
When
That's
I'm traveling,
good.
is to just be reminded that I'm just dad, first and foremost. And so, like, having people in your life that are going to speak truth to you and over you. And then this next one is kind of very, very practical, like humility. How do we cultivate humility in our lives? We have to regain right awareness of ourselves. The gift of humility is that it actually regains our self-awareness. Nobody wants to be blindsided. And so if we gain self-awareness, it's very hard for us to get blindsided. So here's what you can do right now. As soon as this podcast is done, if it's night or day, doesn't matter. If it's raining, doesn't matter. It rained all day yesterday. I did this yesterday with my kids, in fact. Take off your shoes. Take off your socks. Go stand in the green grass. Go look up into the skies. Observe what is there. And then remind yourself of this one simple truth. None of this required you. You have nothing to do with the stars staying in their orbit, with the gravitational forces keeping all you have nothing to do with any, John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of man. Like, this moment of humility, of just even we're getting drenched in the rain. It's like, man, we need this rain for creation to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And I had nothing to do. I couldn't force the rain dial to come on, and all of a sudden the North Carolina, Charlotte just gets this is all Jesus. Jesus is the one who does it. Y'all, if that doesn't create a deep sense of humility in you, then I'm not quite sure what will.
Hey crew, it's Adam from The Conversation. I'm so glad that you've tuned in to this episode. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you go and click the subscribe button, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on Pando, so you don't miss a single episode of The Conversation. Also, I need to give a huge shout out to these partners. These partners help make this episode of The Conversation possible. They're organizations that I know and trust that I want you to know about as well. Have a great rest of your day.